So this episode went in a completely different direction than what I was expecting. This is somewhat unfortunate as it's the longest episode yet. I wouldn't call it a filler episode, but the detour it takes doesn't actually lead anywhere. It ties up a loose end that doesn't make any sense. Unlike what they did in the Book of Boba Fett, where Mando getting Grogu back from Luke Skywalker led directly into Season 3. And no, Luke Skywalker doesn't appear in this episode. The focus is put on a character that I never would have guessed. But first, let's talk about the parts of the episode that do focus on Din Djarin. So if you've watched the last two episodes, you know that Din Djarin has completed his mission to redeem himself. He bathed in the living waters of Mandalore and even took a sample of the water as proof back to the Mandalorian covert. But remember that little matter of the existence of a living mythosaur? The mythosaur being the backbone of the legends of the Mandalorians, it literally has myth in the name. Bo-Katan quickly glimpsed the mythosaur when she jumped in the pool to save Din Djarin. If you're wondering whether the mythosaur pulled Din Djarin under, it did not. You would have seen some part of the creature, and in fact, it would have been too big to even make it to the surface. Din Djarin sunk because, according to Bo-Katan, during the Empire's purge of Mandalore, a bomb must have opened up a fissure in the mines, which deepened what otherwise would have been a relatively shallow pool. And if you remember from the last episode, Bo-Katan bathed in the waters as a child, as was the custom for Mandalorian royalty. So she definitely would have realized that the pool was that deep before and have said something to Din Djarin. After that ordeal, I was expecting, or at least hoping, that Bo-Katan and Din Djarin might go back into the water and try to find the mythosaur. That definitely seems like something Din Djarin would be interested in. I mean, imagine him going back to his people, not only redeemed, not only proving that Mandalore isn't poisonous, but being able to tell them that there is a living mythosaur. He would have been a hero. Bo-Katan does ask Din if he saw anything when he was in the water, and he says no, and then she just brushes it off like nothing even happened. What the hell? They could have given the audience a little bit more than that. I was honestly expecting much more from Din's quest to redeem himself than we got. But in returning to the planet Kalevala, which I mispronounced in my last video as Kasavala, Din and Bo-Katan find themselves fighting several TIE interceptors which pop out of nowhere. Apparently they belong to a warlord in one of the systems nearby, which Bo-Katan has systematically pissed off in the years since the Purge. There are also TIE bombers which destroy Bo-Katan's castle, leaving her practically homeless. When she tries to get revenge by destroying the TIE bombers, a whole squadron of TIE interceptors shows up, and Din Djarin and his N1 starfighter provide backup and leads Bo-Katan to the Mandalorian covert on the planet that we still don't know the name of. Right away, they are met by Paz Vizsla, the only named Mandalorian besides Din Djarin that is a part of the Children of the Watch, as Bo-Katan calls them. Paz Vizsla has always had a problem with Din Djarin, whether it be because of Beskar, the Darksaber, and now because Din is an apostate, and so is Bo-Katan, or at least they were. When Din gives the armorer the sample of the water he took, she tests it and it seems to shimmer. It hasn't been explained what makes the living waters of Mandalore so special. Like, what makes them sacred in the first place? What gives them this shimmering quality? It's something that they'll potentially reveal if we learn more about the mythosaur. Perhaps the mythosaur's body may give off unique properties that affect the water. But now Din Djarin has been redeemed in the eyes of his people, and all his buddies congratulate him on being welcomed back to the tribe. My question is, what will he do with the Darksaber? We know he doesn't want to lead, but he can't just give the Darksaber away because that's not how the ritual works. Surprisingly, Bo-Katan gets welcomed to the covert as well, not just as a guest, but as a full-blown member of the Watch, or whatever it is they call themselves. Because even though she doesn't live according to the way, she technically bathed in the living waters when she saved Din Djarin, and she also conveniently hadn't taken off her helmet since then. So I guess as long as she keeps the helmet on, she will be a part of this group, which I'm actually interested in seeing. I'm interested in seeing more of this group, hopefully seeing more members given an actual identity, and learning more about the way and finding out what will happen with the future of the Mandalorians. The only person who seems unhappy about this development is Paz Vizsla. Now, his character has always had a chip on his shoulder, but that's probably for a good reason, which has never been outright stated in the series, and it has to do with his name. Paz Vizsla comes from the clan founded by Tar Vizsla, the first and possibly only Mandalorian to become a Jedi and creator of the Darksaber, which has been used as a symbol of power and the right to rule Mandalore for centuries. Another descendant of Tar Vizsla's lineage was Pre Vizsla, the founder of the Death Watch, a sect of Mandalorians who rejected the peaceful ways of modern Mandalorian society and wanted to bring their people back to their warrior ways. Fun fact, Jon Favreau actually voiced both Pre Vizsla and Paz Vizsla. Pre Vizsla was a previous bearer of the Darksaber and leader of Death Watch during the Clone Wars, before being killed by Darth Maul, who took over ownership of the Darksaber and leadership of Death Watch before he too was ousted by the Jedi and clones at the end of the Clone Wars. Bo-Katan Kryze was originally a member of the Death Watch before abandoning the group and would go on to rule Mandalore for a short period. Several signs point to the members of the Watch or the tribe as being an offshoot of Death Watch. And it's not just their name, but the armorer's horns on her helmet, which was part of the Death Watch uniform when Darth Maul led the group. When Din Djarin was brought into the group, they sported the Death Watch colors, and as we know now, their adherence to tradition. So even though we're not given Paz Vizsla's age, he likely harbors anger towards Bo-Katan for abandoning Death Watch and Din Djarin for carrying the weapon he believes is his birthright. My theory is that at some point in this season, Paz Vizsla will attempt to take over the Watch and reacquire the Darksaber, but will probably die because obviously they're not going to kill off the main characters unless they see this season as the swan song of Bo-Katan. Now, the bulk of the episode has absolutely nothing to do with Mandalorians. Instead, the episode takes us to Coruscant for the first time in the series, and we focus on two characters. I misspoke about that earlier. It's actually two characters that I thought we wouldn't see again, or at least not in this way. One of them I thought we wouldn't see at all because I thought she was just a throwaway character. Those two characters are Dr. Pershing and Elia Kane. Elia Kane, who up until now was simply the comms officer on Moff Gideon's ship. Dr. Pershing, on the other hand, has been in the show since the very first episode. He's a clone engineer who previously worked for the Imperial Remnant under Moff Gideon. His job was to figure out how to introduce Grogu's DNA containing midichlorians into a clone body. You could argue that most of the events of this series take place because of Dr. Pershing. Pershing was captured by the New Republic at the end of Season 2, as was Elia Kane, though that part was off-screen. In their reintroduction to the series, both characters are members of the New Republic Amnesty Program, where the New Republic accepted former Imperial troops into New Republic society. Though at least on Coruscant, they would be restricted to a particular area of the planet, a new job was chosen for them, and they had to undergo routine evaluations of their mental state and loyalty towards the New Republic. They were even given number designations. Pershing is identified as Amnesty Scientist L52, and Kane is identified as Amnesty Officer G68. With all these measures in place, the New Republic doesn't seem much better than the Empire. I mean, yes, it's definitely better for a lot of people, but remember that many served in the Imperial military because they genuinely believed that they were doing the right thing. As we learn from series like Star Wars Rebels and even movies and shows that have come out afterwards that have kind of built on the idea that it wasn't as black and white as we used to think. And also keep in mind that many people in the Empire were forcibly conscripted. So to those forcibly conscripted, all that the end of the war did was trade one oppressor for another. Although at the beginning of this episode, Pershing is shown giving a speech to the New Republic where he explains that he was forced to do his work for the Empire, but also believed that his work was good if the results of said work had been in the right hands. And by the end of the episode, I did believe that Pershing is a good guy who believes his cloning experiments can do good for society. In his speech, he explains that his interest in cloning began when his mother died due to a faulty heart, a condition that could easily have been remedied had cloning technology been better on his home planet. Furthermore, if you recall the first few episodes of The Mandalorian, Pershing was actually fairly humane in his treatment of Grogu, even though he could have just killed him and taken the samples. Elia Kane is much more of a mystery. She comes off as nice and friendly, especially towards Pershing. She even shows him the sights of Coruscant, having lived there before her service in the Empire. She also convinces him to break the rules and go outside of the amnesty zone so that he can secretly gather equipment to continue his cloning experiments. Kane rationalizes that even though cloning is illegal according to the Coruscant Accords, if Pershing really believes it would do some good, that he should continue. And I think she makes a good point there about, you know, blindly following orders is what got them in trouble with the Empire in the first place, so they shouldn't just turn around and do the same thing with the New Republic. But I also thought, okay, so Kane is undercover, still working for Moff Gideon somehow, and she's trying to get Pershing to go back to the Imperial remnants to continue his experiments. So they sneak out to the decommissioned shipyards, break into a Star Destroyer, and Pershing gets the scientific equipment he needs to continue his experiments on his own. But as they attempt to get back out of the shipyard, they're caught by guards. Except that it turns out that it was actually a trap set up by Kane. For some reason, she had convinced Pershing to try and continue his experiments, get illegal equipment, and get caught. At first, I was confused. Was she trying to ingratiate herself into the New Republic by turning in Pershing? Did she have some kind of vendetta against him? She managed to convince the people in charge of the Amnesty Organization that Pershing snuck on board the ship because he was still dealing with trauma and brainwashing from the Empire. So they plug him into a machine where they were going to erase the trauma using what is essentially a mind-wiping machine called the Mitigator. Pershing identifies the device as the Mind Flayer, which is the same device but used by the Empire for torture. And the technician says, "Oh no, we're not going to wipe your mind. We're going to use a lower level voltage so that it only removes your traumatic memories. It'll be painless." When Pershing continues to freak out about it, the technician says, "I've actually used the device on myself and found the experience quite pleasant." Which to me is like, you're really not helping your case there. This just adds to the dystopian conditions of the New Republic that the members of the amnesty program have to live with. I mean, even if the machine only does what you're saying it does and removes traumatic memories, I still wouldn't want those memories removed. I mean, you're basically wiping away a part of who you are. Kane is there to watch the procedure, and she convinces one of the technicians to leave. She amps up the voltage and watches Pershing writhe with this sadistic look on her face. I'm just thinking, what? Why would she do that? What did she have against Pershing? Don't get me wrong, it's an interesting twist to the episode, but there doesn't really seem to be a point. Elia Kane isn't a prominent character, so we don't really know anything about her. We're not given any reason that would have motivated her actions. A rumor was mentioned in the episode that Gideon might have been able to avoid his tribunal, but why would he have ordered Kane to kill Pershing? We know that the use of cloning by the Imperial Remnant is successful because in The Rise of Skywalker, Palpatine returned somehow. That's why in the beginning of the video, I said it didn't make sense for the writers to tie up this loose end, because we know The Mandalorian leads to the sequel trilogy. It doesn't make sense to kill off Pershing or wipe his mind. There is an Easter egg in this episode that I think many people didn't even notice, and that's Tongs Days. Tongs Day sounds like it's just the name of a weekday, but it actually has a deeper meaning related to Mandalorians. In Legends continuity, the original species that inhabited Mandalore were known as the Tong. The Tong were the precursors to the current Mandalorian culture. They were a humanoid, reptilian-looking species that glorified war and conquest. Eventually, a leader among them, known as Mandalore the Great, led them to a planet that they would name Mandalore. Afterwards, they took on the name Mandalorians, which means sons and daughters of Mandalore. Eventually, the Tong would bring other species into the Mandalorian culture. However, they would eventually become extinct, leaving their culture to many different species to continue on, leading to the primarily human Mandalorian culture that we see today. While this episode had some interesting aspects, I think it could have been a lot better. I expect at least one more episode like this where they deviate entirely from the main story, but hopefully the point of that episode is more coherent. Tell me your thoughts about this episode in the comment section below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like and subscribe button and the notification bell so that you never miss out on a new video. Thanks for watching.